All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Keri Gray, and I work as the Senior Director at the American Association of People with Disabilities. And I'm very excited to be chatting with a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, an incredible person, Christine Liao. So today what we're going to be talking about is the importance of voting. So it's no secret that we have a big election upon us. A lot of folks across the country have already started voting in terms of early voting, absentee voting, voting by mail, and then other folks will be voting in person on November 3rd. And this year of 2020, just in and of itself, have given us a lot of reasons to vote. Essentially, we're looking at everything from healthcare, what's happening with the Affordable Care Act, to community organizing with Black Lives Matter, to looking at everything from healthcare and what's been going on with COVID. There are so many issues that are critical to our community. And the way in which our democracy works is that we elect officials who will help ensure that we are building systems, infrastructures, policies that support our ideas, that support what we essentially want to see across our community. So I'm excited to be chatting with Christine today to hear her perspective of the role that she plays at AAPD, and particularly working with the younger generation. So again, my name is Keri Gray. As a visual description, I am a Black woman who is currently wearing this like orange, earthy head wrap. I wear glasses, and I have on this like green flowery shirt. And with that, I am going to kick off the first question and ask Christine, can you tell us more about your role and your work with students and young professionals with disabilities at AAPD?
Hi, y'all. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today, Keri. So my name is Christine Liao. My visual description is I'm a young Asian woman with really long, straight, dark brown hair. I'm wearing a black shirt with flowers on it and a purple maroon blazer. I also have some plants behind me. And I am the programs manager here at AAPD. So AAPD's mission is to increase the political and economic power of people with disability. So we do this through some of our national programming initiatives, including the Summer Internship Program, Disability Advocacy Certificate Program, the NBC Universal Scholarship, the Paul G. Hearn Emerging Leader Award. But all of them essentially focused on giving meaningful opportunity to emerging leaders with disability to gain leadership skills, to employment skills, and all of that. So I'm excited to be here today.
Yes, appreciate that. So you do a lot of work with this, millennial generation, Generation Z in particular. And one thing that we know is that young folks tend to be at the forefront of social change across our country. They tend to be very outspoken about what they want and their expectation for folks around them. So as you think about your students and the different types of things that they're working on in terms of career, workplace, and things of that nature, I'm wondering, what are some of your dreams, your hopes for your students as they navigate school and as they navigate their careers?
So this is a super interesting question because it's like, my job is built around giving them the opportunities and the skills and all of that. So it's like, of course, I hope, they graduate college doing what they love, they get a job that they love, and they go out there and revolutionize the world and change it. But when I think about what do I really hope and dream for them, I think there's two things that are really fundamental, but I think we can all still work on a little bit, is access. So two things, access and community. So the first one, access, like when they're in school or if they're working, I really want them to just go to school, be a student, have fun, learn some new things, or work with their coworkers and all of that. But the reality is still thinking about, okay, I got to do all of those things. And am I going to have access to my material? Am I going to get in the classroom? Am I going to be able to afford transportation? Is the transportation accessible? All of those things are still weighing on their mind. And it's like, you know how we use the idiom, like, we want a seat at the table, but there are so many things that you have to do before you get to the table. Like, can you get to it? Are you invited? Are you included? And then once you're at the table, can you understand everything that's being talked about? Are your opinion validated and included in all of those things? And so that really leads me to the second thing, which is community. And that's the cool part about my job is, you know, we have a cohort every year of really awesome disabled people coming together, talking about that, and a community build, you know, that solidarity, that affirmation, that like, yes, I see you, I hear you, I feel you, those are my experiences too. And then you have that community of people who support you, who push you along, who are there to pick you up. You know, it's like whether your crew, your squad, whatever you want to call it, but your community of people. And I really think as long as the students have access and community, the world really is like, it's open to them and they can go where they want to go. I want them to have that choice of deciding where they want to end up doing.
That makes a lot of sense. To me, it makes me think of, you know, the dreams and aspirations that my parents talk about for me growing up. Like growing up as this Black girl with disabilities, I know my parents were just like, we want you to be successful. We want you to do anything that you want to accomplish out of life. And there's these additional concerns around how much racism could she experience? How much ableism could she experience? Not only do we want her to be successful, but we want her to be able to navigate systems in a way that will value her diversity, her identity, how all of that makes me who I am, I guess. While in addition to having that standard dream of I'm trying to be successful. And so to me, it just makes a lot of sense of thinking about like this generation of talent that's entering into the workplace, that's navigating school, and like how can they, you know, good grades, you know, learn what they need to learn, but can they also genuinely have community, genuinely have spaces that will value who they are and understand that regardless of mental health, of physical disabilities, of language, of all of those different types of things that just come with the diversity of our country. It makes sense to me.
No, I totally agree with that. That's why I really wanted to bring both of them together, because like growing up, I was afforded like a ASL interpreter that was able to access my class materials and stuff. But I never really met any other deaf people, let alone deaf Asian people. So it was like, yeah, I'm getting through it, but I don't feel empowered. Just like, what can I do if I don't see people like me? What opportunities are out there for me if I'm not seeing a lot of other people like me represented? And so I think you bring up that good point of like, you gotta have that community, and it's really hard to get a job these days, and it's just like, how are you gonna get through it if you don't have cheerleaders or someone who feels like they're on your team?
Super real, super real. Those are, I think, the type of elected officials that we need across our country, those who are thinking about these types of experiences, who are understanding the multiple ways in which we are having to navigate life. And so creating policies and procedures that are inclusive of people with disabilities of color, and all of our different intersections. That makes a lot of sense. I think that you've already started to touch on this, but to ask a little bit more directly, I'm wondering if you're seeing, what are some of the barriers that your students are experiencing on their journey of trying to be successful, whether while in school or as they're starting to navigate you know, work and career? Are there certain things that you're seeing are just really becoming an issue for folks?
Yeah, so I started thinking as you were talking, thinking about different barriers. You know, we have like the physical barriers, other materials accessible to them, other ramps, other room accessible for a wheelchair to navigate, all of those things. And then I just started thinking about, you know, people's attitudes and people's perception of people with disabilities. You know, non-disabled people might think disabled people are less than or not as valuable or productive as non-disabled people. And so I started thinking about that, and then I started thinking about what is really the root of those barriers and challenges. And I think you talked about that a little bit earlier, and the system. And the system is designed by really privileged people, non-disabled people, cis men, white, affluent, access to all of those things. And they designed that system to work for themselves, to succeed and make it easy. But that doesn't include any other diversity group or marginalized group in that. And I think with the disability community, and the students are noticing this a lot, and they're not part of the decision making. Even when you request accommodation, it's always supposed to say, we can provide X, Y, and Z. It's never what works for you. What do you like? What is effective? What matches with your schedule, your style? They're not really engaging with the disabled student to be like, I want to know what works for you. Instead, it's still very much like, here are the 5 accommodations we can provide for you, and that's all we got. And then it becomes already very limiting in that regard. And so I think our system is very much designed for a lot of our students to fit in that mold. And what I see from a lot of our students, they're like, no, I don't want to fit that mold. I want to be my own person. I want to do it my way because this works for me. But the challenge is these people are still not listening and letting them make that kind of decision for themselves.
That's dope. That's another reason that I love working with and hearing the experiences of young people, because on one hand, we get to acknowledge like what's not working. And we get to acknowledge this, you know, idea of stigma and discrimination is still very real to this day. And there can be a lot of workplaces and schools that are not comfortable or prepared for accommodations, for interacting with students who may be on the spectrum, for students that may need to not have classrooms that are in still buildings that are still inaccessible. Like there's a lot of different things that can happen. So one, we're acknowledging like the changes that need to be made, but young people, I think, are in a place where they are demanding for changes to be made. And they're in a place where they're saying that you have a culture that exists or systems that exist that are not made for not just me, but a lot of other people. And so we're not interested in you trying to train us to fit into a culture that is not inclusive of people with disabilities, but instead we want to add value in a way that allows us to readjust that culture and allows us to think about like, what would it look like if we use more universal design concepts? What would it look like if we incorporated other opportunities for folks to, I don't know, just do projects and engagements in a way that it's more diverse. And so I think that's what I'm hearing from the, you know, the perspective of working with young people is not only are we acknowledging the changes that need to be made, but we are actively pushing for leadership and for collective thought for those things to come together.
Yeah, exactly. And I like what you said about the demanding for that change, because, you know, like we just recently celebrated 30 years of the ADA, and I was talking about that with them, and they're like, yes, the ADA is amazing, it protects us, it's our civil rights, but we can do better, and we are going to do better. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, there was like so much work that went in, but they were thinking, what else can we do? This is not good. It's not like we're gonna stop here. It's like, what can we do next? And after that, until everyone is 100% included and protected. And so I think that made me think of that example from earlier this summer.
Yes, I love that. And thinking about what's next, I think we're constantly in our roles trying to improve and trying to, build opportunities where disability rights, disability justice is advancing day by day, like brick by brick. And from my perspective, this is just me, but I found that this level of progression takes a very collaborative effort. So I'm thinking about the voices and perspective of young people. And then I'm also thinking about, again, thinking about voting and thinking about how we elect folks who can advocate and put our ideas and our needs and our desires into practice. And so I'm curious if you have a sense of certain qualities that your students need or are looking for when it comes to, leadership, when it comes to mentors, and particularly when it comes to folks that are running for office and are there to support and amplify us. What types of qualities are we looking for from those folks?
So we talked about that a lot throughout the summer in the Disability Advocacy Certificate Program. We talked about advocacy on the local level, and we really mean like local level, like school board, at your community, and then the state level and the national level. And I think they, first of all, just want people to listen to them. Not like nod your head and be like, yeah, I get it, but listen to them, the story, and be like, I hear you as a person, but realizing that person is a part of multiple different communities. You know what I mean? It's not just listen to me and my disability. It's like listen to me as a woman of color, as a woman living in this state. Like listen to my entire story and not just part of our disability. So I think the wanting someone to listen to them and then allowing them to be a part of that competition. It's one thing to listen, but it's another thing to, like you said, have it be a collaborative process where they can be part of that competition. And what I said earlier about letting them be part of the decision making, saying, yes, this works for me, this works for my community, this is what we have been asking for around like healthcare, education, and all of those things. So I think those are the top two things. Listen with them and then engaging them in the process instead of saying, yeah, I hear you, let's see what I can do about it. Compared to, I hear you, let's have you be a part of this competition to make that change happen.
And to me, that makes a lot of sense because you would think that would be the role of our elected officials and the folks who are in these leadership positions is again, we are electing them because we believe in their competence and their ability to execute and create and protect our rights and advance our rights. And at the same time, we also want them to be a reflection of who we are and what we see out of our communities. So I would hope that we have many, many folks on the ballot this year on the local level, on the state level, across up and down in the presidential elections who are genuinely understanding the needs of people with disabilities, and particularly how you said it, people with disabilities who are also multiply marginalized, and understanding how we all like cross intersect and what that means in terms of how we think about policies and the progression of our society. So let's see that happen. Let's vote that in. My next question, I'm really curious about if you're seeing any issues that are important to millennials, Generation Z, young folks with disabilities in these days, So I know for me, I have been very in tune with what's been happening with the Black Lives Matter uprising. And I want to see candidates that are acknowledging racial justice with disability justice and who are saying that we need to address and create solutions around state violence. Like, that's the issue that I'm just very passionate about. And I'm curious if you've been working with your students. I'm sure y'all talk a lot about employment and workplace topics. So I'm wondering if that's like a main issue that y'all discuss that's important, or if there are also other issues that y'all kind of naturally bring up and say, this is what's important to us.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it earlier. A lot of them are thinking about cross-suitability, cross-identity, like that intersecting identity. And a lot of them are thinking, hey, you know, my disability identity is impacted by everything else. It cannot be like a standalone thing. So they also talked a lot about Black Lives Matter this past summer, you know, like if you're a white disabled person, how different is that experience compared to a Black disabled person? What does that look like when you're voting, when in your neighborhood, when it comes to police? All of those things, how are those experiences different? Just because you're disabled doesn't mean that everyone who has a disability has that same experience. So recognizing that, and then recognizing how healthcare, for example, might be tied to employment. So recognizing that it's not just about getting a job and having meaningful opportunities, but it's that access to healthcare, that access to things that you need. And so it's not just a standalone thing. And I think they were starting to pull all of those things together. They were like, a lot of people have negative perceptions about people with disabilities. Why is that? Oh, it's because in the media, they're always that like helpless person who can't do anything. And they're like, look, we want to change that. So we had some people talk about how can we increase disability representation in the media. And then, you know, there are folks with a lot of natural disasters happening lately. You know, if they live there, how are we supporting them? And that becomes like a bigger issue of environmental and climate justice is disability justice, because if we're not addressing all of the changes that are happening in our climate and not recognizing how disabled people might be impacted by that, just starting to realize like the whole bubble and the bubble within a bubble, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you can't just be a person with a disability walking around only thinking about your disability, because there's so many things that impact it. Race, your access to healthcare, education, where you live, the weather, all of those things.
Intersectionality is the way. We need folks to say it, to practice it, to bring in different opportunities that are through an intersectional framework. And it definitely seems like this generation right here is just like, they want to know that you understand that. And I love how it ties to our identities, and it also ties to the issues that we're dealing with constantly in navigating health, wellness, employment, all of those different things. Like you got to understand how it connects and it builds into our collective liberation and opportunity to live. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I have one final question for you. So I am curious, with an election, again, that's already in the process and right around the corner in terms of November 3rd, I'm curious, do you believe that voting is a helpful tool in advancing disability rights?
100% think that it is absolutely vital to advancing the disability rights movement. And I think with voting, it allows you to think about, like we were talking about, the elected officials are supposed to be a reflection of what we want in a candidate. And that is one of the ways that you can do it. And it's your power that no one can take it from you. Like, there's a lot of voter suppression going on, but we are pushing through. We are suing people that plus people who, and all of those things, and we are getting creative about ways that we can vote, as well as supporting people and educating them about the power of the vote. So yeah, I think it is absolutely important.
I 100% agree. I mean, and I want to acknowledge that voting can be tough for folks. As you mentioned, we would be remiss not to say that voter suppression and voter inaccessibility, it's real. And it can absolutely block your opportunity in participating in our democracy. But even beyond that, there are a number of folks who have felt defeated by voting, and just not seeing the type of representation that they need, not seeing the type of change in our communities. And they can get to a point where they feel burnt out by saying, is this really helping? And so I just want to acknowledge the fact that that mindset is real. And I know there can be a number of folks out there that are wrestling with it. At the same time, I do want to push back on that a little bit. And even though I can say that our democracy is not perfect and that there are struggles in which we're dealing with, I think it's so critical that we be a part of the process and that we still push for protecting and keeping the things that are important for us, and to say, here's the type of change that I want to have. We've seen some real progression in terms of diverse representation in Congress. I want to keep seeing that happen. We've seen some real progression in terms of the types of legislations that are rolling out around disability rights, and being able to keep these pieces of legislation for years, because sometimes they can go away. They can be voted out. And so I want to see folks who are saying that even though this is not easy, even though sometimes it can feel defeating, that we do breathe through the challenges and say, I'm still going to commit to the process. I'm still going to participate, and I'm going to push for these elected officials to do what I expect of them to do. So again, I just hope that folks vote. Please show up on November 3rd. Please vote. If it's by mail, you should be doing that now, as soon as possible. Early voting on AAPD's website, you can find a ton of resources by state that let you know deadlines, that let you know where you can find polling locations, that can let you know information that's specifically related to being a person with a disability and voting. So if you go to www.aapd.com/voting, you will see our resources about voting in 2020, and I encourage you to leverage those so that you're prepared for participating this year. Christine, I'm so happy we were able to chat. I really appreciate it. Do you have any closing thoughts or things that you want to add into the space today?
No, I don't have anything else other than echoing Keri's statement of please vote. It is your right, it is your power that no one can take away from you to create that change.
Yes, yes. All right, well, thanks again. And until next time, I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.